Hey everybody, quick video today, not going to be too long, just want to clarify some things. It's been brought to my attention by, it's been a little while now, I forget who, I probably should have looked that up, but in the YouTube comments someone had mentioned in their UFC lineup optimizing they were using that they had used the method that I had specified in a previous video. The add player to lineup is going to be the command you use to force a player into contention, force him onto your lineup. Think of it as making him a minimum 100% exposure. He's going on your lineups, okay? To lock a player in their lineups using the add player to lineup command. And it wasn't working. They were in lineups, but not all their lineups. And I thought I'd test that for basketball. So I said, oh, maybe it's just a bug with the UFC thing. So I went back and I looked into it some. And I've discovered that it is not just a bug. I had been misled by the documentation wording, which we'll pull up here. So, I mean, if you guys have been looking at the documentation, I would imagine you would probably think the same thing. Maybe not. So here we are, the DFS lineup optimizer usage. And just scrolling down to advanced usage, the very first thing we're going to go to is locking players. And as they tell you right here, you may want to lock some players that you want to see in your lineup. Player, get player by name, optimize, add player to lineup, and then in the comment they put lock this player in lineup. That is just not true. So do take everything you read with a grain of salt. And this is a good lesson for all modules going forward. You're reading the documentation. If it doesn't look like it's doing what it says it's doing, double check, because it might not be. It's just normal people that are making these and putting them out, and they put it out for free, and they give you all this wonderful documentation, and we're very grateful for it, but everybody does make mistakes. That may be true if you're only doing one single lineup. I haven't tested that because if I'm making one lineup, I'm making it myself. Like, I'm manually crafting it and figuring everything out I want to do. The optimizers for when I want a bunch of lineups in a row with a couple broader restrictions in place just to play the numbers game and get them all out there. So that is what it says here. So if you go back and double check that, you're like, oh wait, but it does say that Nick obviously was wrong, and which means he was right the first time and wrong the second time. But in reality, I was wrong the first time, right the second time, and this wording is wrong. If you don't believe me, try it out yourself, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But if you're too lazy to, I'm going to show you how right here. So to get going, we're just going to go ahead and define an optimizer and look at our first 10 lineups. And as a special little treat for everybody, since it was a mea culpa, that was my bad. I thought I had tested it and thought it was working. I must have just missed something. Not a huge deal. I'm going to go ahead and show you this other command you can use as well. It's just a little icing on the cake to help stomach the fact that I gave you some bad information previously. We have this optimizer.print statistic, and that's what we're going to use instead of going through here and counting how many times a player is in each lineup. We're just going to run this print statistic function, and it's just optimizer.print statistic. So after you run your lineup set, you don't even have to print them all out here. So if you want to make use of the methods we had employed previously for exporting out your lineups to pandas and then reformatting them and spitting them out in a CSV, you can go ahead and run this here, and you never have to print and look at these. You can get kind of a high-level breakdown of the teams, the players, and how much they're both being used, which is very helpful. So we're just going to run that, and it'll right off the bat tell you the top teams that are used, how many players total were used from each team, how many out of the total teams were used. So 12 out of the 14 teams were used. So that means there were 2 teams on today's not today. This goes all the way back to, that'd be February 27th, I'm guessing, 227. Anyways, this is just the slate that was already saved in this folder for doing the lineup stuff previously, so we're just going to go ahead and keep using it. So we can double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yep, we used 12 out of the 14. Top players. We can see how many lineups each player was used on. So right here we can see that Ty Jerome, Brandon Ingram, and RJ Barrett were used on all 10 lineups. That's a quick, easy way to check and say, hey, wait a minute. You know, RJ Barrett can be a little up and down. Maybe I don't want him on all 10 in case he doesn't have a very good game. Or you look down and maybe you see, oh, Kem Birch was only used on 1, but I really like him today. Maybe I should, up his point projection to make sure I get him on a few more lineups. Things like that, just real quick, top down looking at it. And then it'll show you players by team. So you can tell you used a New York player 16 times, 10 times RJ Barrett, 6 times Julius Randle. No other Knicks were used. So that's an easy way to kind of look at it. But as we can see here, we have like Luka Doncic on 9 lineups, okay? And that was just our normal lineup set. So we'll go ahead and minimize those 2 windows. And now we're going to look at the add player to lineup. Now remember, Luka was on 9 of our 10 lineups. So theoretically, based on what we thought before, if we add player to lineup, let's go ahead and take the max exposure out for right now. If we do add player to lineup, and we do Luka as our add player, so we're reinitializing. So this is a clean optimizer. There's not going to be any leftover parameters or anything like that on this. So we define Luka, optimizer get player by name, Luka Doncic, optimizer.add player to lineup, Luka, for lineup and optimizer, optimize 10 lineups, and then we'll check those statistics again. Let's scroll on down to our statistics. And we do have Luka as 10 lineups, so it does lock him in, okay? Now you might be thinking, but Nick, you just said that's not what it does. If you have no other parameters on, it does. But odds are, if you're spitting out enough lineups that using an optimizer is beneficial, you're probably going to have things like a max exposure, okay? Because like we just said, maybe you don't want Nicholas Claxton on 7 lineups, okay? Maybe you don't want Ty Jerome on 10, RJ Barrett on 10. Whatever it is, maybe you don't want that. So if we put a max exposure of 5 blanketed across the entire slate, and we rerun that, you're going to find that nobody has more than 5, okay? Not even Luka. But we locked Luka in, right? Kind of. The way that breaks down is the optimizer parameters come before locking him in. So what that's saying basically is we are for sure going to put Luka on 5 lineups because that's the max exposure. When we hit that, it kicks it out. If, for instance, we wanted to do Tim Hardaway, okay? Let's just swap Luka out. Tim Hardaway, we're going to leave the variables Luka because that doesn't matter. We run it again, we can see Tim Hardaway was only used 3 times, and if we add him to the lineup and do 50% exposure, we should get Tim Hardaway 5 times now. And sure enough, we do. So as you can see, the add player to lineup command will lock that player in to the max exposure for the slate. If you don't define a max exposure, it'll lock them in at 100% because there's no upper bound there. If you put an upper bound in place, it will lock them at that upper bound, okay? And I think that could have been explained better in the documentation, but it is what it is. We're working with it. You know, that's one of the downsides of using something that somebody else made rather than creating it ourselves, is we don't know some of these ins and outs, but we're getting there. We're learning. We're figuring it out as we go. So, how do we lock Tim Hardaway or Luka or anybody in to all of the lineups while still maintaining a blanket max exposure of only 50%? Because especially someone like Luka, you might not want anybody else on more than 50% of your lineups, but you might want Luka on more than 50% of your lineups. So now we're going to come down here and we're going to explore how we can actually set a floor of a 100% exposure, okay? So we're going to take a look at JaVale McGee, because JaVale McGee does not get used a ton, right? He's not in a lot of lineups. So this is, again, just our base lineup. We're going to come down here, see how often JaVale McGee got used. JaVale McGee got used a whole 2 times with no additional parameters on the lineup, okay? So if we want to set JaVale.min exposure as 1, let's go ahead and take out the max exposure for now, and we'll see if we jump up to 100% from 20%, or 10 lineups from 2 lineups. So we slide on down here. We take a look-see-do, and we see JaVale McGee is now on 10 lineups as opposed to the sad 2 lineups he was on before. So now, let's say we want everybody else to be at a max of 50%, but we want JaVale on 100%, right? Because we're high on JaVale McGee tonight. So we'll put max exposure equals 0.5. We'll run it. And, uh-oh. We get an error. Can't generate lineups. Now this might surprise you, but I knew that error was going to pop up there. I have done some fairly extensive testing to figure out what we can do here. And as it turns out, if you're only specifying for that player a minimum exposure, that minimum exposure cannot be greater than the blanket max exposure here. Because if we come down here and make this 0.6, we're going to get the same thing. We're going to get another error. But if we make it 0.5, it should run fine. And now JaVale's going to be on 50% of lineups, or 5 of them, which is still 3 more lineups than he is with no restrictions. So we're still bumping him. However, we're only getting him 5 times. Along with all these other folks, we're getting 5 times. But we want JaVale on 10 lineups. So how do we do that? It's a fairly simple fix. All we have to do is define a max exposure as well. We'll do max exposure equals 1. Min exposure equals 1. Now we just ran the min exposure by itself and it didn't work because it didn't play nice with our max exposure blanket statement. But if we do a min and max for just JaVale, then it doesn't matter what our blanket max exposure is. It will now override that for him specifically and allow him to be put on all 10 lineups. So if we come down here again, we can see we're not getting an error. We ran through. Now JaVale McGee is in 10 lineups and everybody else maxes out of 5. And that is how we do that. Sorry for any confusion if anybody's been having issues with their lineups since that previous video came out. I took it for granted. I read it in the documentation and I guess I didn't double check it. I just assumed that it was working because that's how I interpreted it from the website. But again, good lesson for us all. Make sure we're double checking. And yeah, that's all I've got. So as usual, if you're enjoying the content, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment down below and let me know what a dum-dum I am for not catching this sooner. Huge thank you to the fellow in the YouTube comments that pointed this out with the UFC. If he hadn't pointed that out, who knows how long it would have been before I would have figured it out and put another video out to clarify for everybody. And of course, huge thank you to everybody in the Patreon. A lot of this, it helps keep me motivated to see that support coming in. I know I haven't been online in the Discord a lot lately. I've been pretty busy, but we're getting back into it now, and just very grateful. It blows my mind, one, that this many people watch the videos. It blows my mind even more that anybody's willing to try and help financially support it through the Patreon. So, huge thank you to everybody there. You don't know how much it means to me. Appreciate it. See y'all next time.